Welcome to Magic Arcanum. I'm Ryan Gomez. Behind the scenes is Nicole Burdick, and we're so glad you're here because it's story time. Bloomburrow takes us to a plane filled with woodland creatures who might be small in size, but still have to deal with big problems. The official story is told through 5 freely available online chapters, and the set itself contains 9 story spotlight cards that represent key characters and events, but if you haven't collected all of those yet, or found the time to read the website, well, you're in luck, because I'm here to tell you what happens in Bloomburrow. We start off with an introduction to Helga, a frog druid who lives in a cardless place called Pondside, but she doesn't really feel at home there. While the other critters around her are hardworking and focused, Helga is a bit more of a daydreamer, sometimes consumed by intense visions of the future. As she sits by the water's edge and reflects on her life, she absent-mindedly doodles in her ever-present sketchbook and looks down to discover she has drawn the Sunhawk, one of the so-called Calamity beasts of Bloomburrow. Fearful that this is a vision of danger coming to her village, she rushes off to meet with Ivor, another frogfolk druid, but before she can reach him, she hears the ringing of warning bells. Helga looks to the sky and sees Maha descending on Pondside. Maha is another Calamity beast, but not the one Helga had sketched in her own book that morning. The owl, its feathers night, tears into the tiny houses of the village, and Helga runs for the safety of the waterfront before deciding she needs to go to a neighboring town and warn them and see if she can bring help back to Pondside. With Helga on her way, the story cuts over to another character named Mabel. She is a mouse with a husband and 3 children, and it just so happens to be her birthday today. As the family prepares for her party, they are interrupted by a scout who announces a stranger is at the edge of town. Mabel rushes over to investigate and finds Helga, who only manages to whisper, "Please help, Calamity Beast," before collapsing from exhaustion. So Mabel grabs the town healer, and together they carry Helga back to Mabel's house to recover. The story then jumps over to another character, the planeswalker Ral Zarek, in his home on Ravnica, fantasizing about killing Jace. Ral is angry he spent 2 years believing his friend was dead at the hands of the Phyrexians, only for Jace to suddenly appear on Thunder Junction to break loot out of the Fomori vault, fight with Ral, and then vanish. Eventually, Ral admits to himself and to his husband Tomek that maybe he doesn't really want to kill Jace, he just wants answers. But either way, he's got to find Jace first, so Ral goes to ask the Wanderer for help, but she tells him she has lost her spark, like so many planeswalkers at the moment. She tells Ral to go back to where he last saw Jace and open his soul. And being a man of science, Ral finds this a bit ridiculous, but he does retrace his steps on Thunder Junction. Amazingly, he picks up a piece of the trail left behind by Jace's planeswalk here, and he attempts to follow it, only to find himself arriving on Bloomburrow and being turned into an otter. Yes, the magic of this plane prevents anyone from having a human form here, which is why Ral's planeswalker card looks the way it does. And before you ask, we will see how this affects non-human visitors later, too. Anyway, we hop back over to Helga, who has woken up in Mabel's house and is now well enough to speak about the attack on Pondside. She explains what happened to Mabel and to Oliver, the rabbit mayor here at Goodhill. And Oliver, who is also the mayor from Jaws, dismisses the danger and accuses Helga of having an overactive imagination. We learn that attacks from the Calamity Beasts are rare, thanks to someone named Lily of the Valley fighting them off long ago with a fabled weapon called Cragflame. Supposedly, the Calamity Beasts now roam the wilds of Bloomburrow, but tend to avoid the settled areas of the valley, like the cardless Good Hill, where everyone wants to just enjoy Mabel's birthday celebration. Helga decides to stick around and calm her nerves, but Mabel figures someone should at least head over to Pondside to see if it has really been attacked. So she goes up into her attic to retrieve Cragflame from storage, because she happens to be the current guardian of the legendary weapon and is a descendant of the original Lily of the Valley. At the birthday party, Oliver gives a speech in honor of Mabel, and he invites her up to the stage to say a few words. So she uses this opportunity to explain her intent to go check out Pondside, and she asks if anyone here wants to go with her. Some of her friends and fellow Good Hill citizens volunteer, including Finneas, Gev, Hugs, and Zoraline. Helga also pledges her support, and the group plans to head out at first light the next morning. By midday, they reach the ruins of Pondside and find a group of squirrels looting the burned-out houses. The squirrels mention someone named Cruelclaw as they dig through the rubble before they are confronted by Mabel and Helga and the others. There is a fight, but the squirrels escape, and Mabel asks Helga what they should do next. They can either follow the squirrels and try to learn more about Cruelclaw, who may be connected to the Calamity Beast attack, or they can head to the next town and try to catch up with the survivors who fled Pondside. Helga figures the squirrels will lead them to answers more than chasing the survivors will, so the group rests for the night, intending to pick up the trail heading to Three Trees City in the morning. They reach the city after catching a ride with some friendly otters on their fishing boat, and begin to ask around about Cruelclaw. Nobody has any useful information, but one local says, "Hey, you're the second person asking about somebody today," and points them to Ral, in otter form, mind you, desperately asking if anyone has seen a critter with strange lines on his face. Helga opens her sketchbook and flips to a page covered with the lines Ral is describing, which are Jace's iconic tattoos. But before they can unpack what all of this means, there is a commotion at the docks, in the water. The tide is rising rapidly, and everyone watches in awe as the flood gar breaks through the surface of the water. Ral, Mabel, and the others are swept away in a huge wave, which carries them all downstream and deposits them inside a mossy cave. As they try to work out where they are and how to get back to Three Trees City, a group of rat folk step out from the shadows of the cave. These rats threaten Mabel's group and tell them to leave, until an elder among them steps forward and says, "Hang on, these guys clearly aren't here by choice. We should offer them hospitality." This rat introduces himself as Coffee, and he invites the entourage to a meal and a safe place to rest while he hears about their quest. So the group licks their wounds while Mocha Latte explains that everyone is kinda on edge right now because this guy named Cruelclaw recently came through here, and following him is a Calamity Beast causing all sorts of trouble. Caramel Macchiato goes on to say that Cruelclaw seems to be carrying with him an egg, and not just any egg, but a Calamity Beast egg. So you can probably put two and two together here just as fast as Mabel does. She pledges to track Cruelclaw down, recover the egg, and return it to its mother. Some of the others argue against this idea at first, figuring it would be better to just, get rid of it or something, because who knows how dangerous whatever hatches from the egg will be. But Zoraline, the Bat Cleric, says the natural order of things must be restored, or there will be continued chaos. And that pretty much settles it. All they have to do now is figure out where they can find the weasel, and for that, they turn to Helga, hoping her visions will reveal the path. She pulls out her sketchbook, sits down, and tries to let her mind go. After a period of self-doubt, she eventually produces an image of a place called Fountainport, which is enough for the group to make it their next target. They say goodbye to their new rat friends and head out across a dandelion field when they notice a strange bird up in the sky. It resembles the sunhawk from Helga's sketchbook, but it's different. It's got 4 wings that look like they belong to a bat rather than a bird, and Ral tells everyone it must be a dragon, animal shifted, like everything else that comes to this plane. They've never heard of a dragon before, but they know danger when they see it, so everyone runs for cover, and Ral asks Finneas to give him a lightning rod to work with. The rabbit archer just so happens to have a copper-tipped arrow that he fires up into the dragon's mouth, and Ral chases that with a bolt of lightning plucked out of the darkening sky. The dragon is wounded but not killed, and the group is afraid it will just become more aggressive, but instead the dragon flies away, leaving Mabel and company free to resume their journey to Fountainport. They reach the 3-tiered city and make their way to the upper level to seek an audience with King Glarb, intending to warn him about the stolen egg, when they discover the king actually has the egg. Yeah, he paid Cruelclaw and his mercenaries to get it for him, believing when the egg hatches, he could raise whatever emerges as his own personal champion and use it to keep other Calamity beasts away. Mabel and Ral tell him that's a terrible idea and try to point out how many other towns and villages have, already suffered for this plan. But the king says, well, some sacrifices must be made, and he calls forth Cruelclaw to dispose of these pests. We get a big fight scene with Mabel using Cragflame to defeat Cruelclaw, but letting him live, and then turning her attention to King Glarb, who escapes through a portal he opens with his own magic. Things are looking pretty good until the sky goes dark and the dragon bird returns and starts attacking everyone. Mabel, once again, rises to the challenge, but before she can reach the Stormhawk, Maha appears and takes matters into her own hands. Maha fights Dragonhawk and wins. The defeated Dragonhawk flies away again, and Maha looks at Mabel expectantly. Mabel picks up the stolen egg and brings it over to Maha, realizing this is her egg, and she was only destroying villages in search of her missing child. Satisfied, Maha flies off with the egg, and Mabel and company turn their attention back to Fountainport. We learn King Glarb managed to not just portal himself out of the throne room, but has left the city entirely. Cruelclaw has also escaped justice, at least for now. The entourage gets to ride home in style on a cabbage cart, and when they finally make it back to Good Hill, Mayor Oliver is there, ready to throw another party in their honor. As things wind down, Mabel asks Ral what he's going to do next, and Ral says, well, I should keep looking for Jace, and I don't think answers are just going to fall on my head while I'm standing here eating a muffin. Suddenly, Helga's eyes start glowing, and she speaks with a distant voice. The kings in the dark will return. The mage in blue will bring about the end. The vision passes just as fast as it came, and Ral says, wow, I wasn't even eating, but thanks. He tells Mabel he's got to warn others about all of this, including the dragon, and Mabel gives him a pair of silver buttons, one for Ral and one for his husband. Aww. Then Ral planeswalks away in a flash of lightning, and Mabel turns to her children to tell them the best bedtime story they are ever gonna hear. And that's it. That's what happens in Bloomburrow. To recap, Calamity beast attacks are on the rise, which causes a frog named Helga to seek the help of Mabel, heir to Cragflame. Together with a handful of brave critters, they give chase to a weasel named Cruelclaw, who has stolen the egg of Maha. Their adventure leads them to Fountainport to confront the misguided King Glarb, who wanted to hatch the egg and harness its power for his own uses, even if it meant sacrificing other townships in the valley. Mabel and Helga defeat King Glarb and return the egg to Maha, while visiting planeswalker Ral fights off a visiting dragon and gets no closer to finding Jace. It's a pretty tightly contained story, actually, and the 9 spotlight cards manage to cover a lot of it. But still, this wouldn't be Magic Arcanum without a little segment I like to call the Mustache Minute. So get ready, because here we go. So I just said the spotlight cards cover a lot of the story this time around, and that's true, but there are still a few head scratchers. We never actually see Cruelclaw steal the egg in the story, but that moment gets a card anyway. And Maha is a spotlight card, but Aluge isn't, and instead gets represented by Calamitous Tide, which is fine, but it feels a little inconsistent. And this has been a thing for the last couple of sets, where they give us a ton of extra legendary characters who do not appear in the story, while we have story characters who do not get cards. Notably, Mabel's husband is named Clem, and Clem doesn't get a card, but we do get a Clement, who is a frog, and we never see him. So that just feels really odd. Also, we meet Coffee, the helpful rat, who lives in a damp cave, and the story even mentions all of his snail shells and stuff, but he doesn't get a card. Instead, we get a different rat who also has a connection to snails, and I don't see why they didn't just name this guy Coffee. But whatever! The biggest mystery to me is Dragonhawk, who clearly looks to be a dragon from Tarkir, but it is never explained how this creature arrived on Bloomburrow. We never see an omen path, and there is zero evidence of the Phyrexian invasion having ever touched this plane. Nobody references it, there's no debris or damage, and in fact, when Ral mentions other planes, Mabel and the locals do not understand what he is talking about. So we have to assume Bloomburrow somehow has been isolated from all of this other stuff, or at least if there is an omen path open somewhere, it is out in the wilds, away from civilization, and has remained undiscovered for the last 2 years. The ending of the story is also very cryptic. Helga has a vision about the Kings in the Dark returning, and the Mage in Blue will bring about the end, which obviously means Jace and his plan to purge the multiverse, but that first part is much more vague. Logically, she is referring to the Fomori, who once had a great empire that reached across the multiverse. Jace is carrying loot, which we believe is a baby Fomori right now, and Quint found what appeared to be another one in a stasis tank on Ixalan earlier this year. But we have also been told by the game's creators that Bloomburrow is the start of the so-called Dragonstorm arc, a storyline connected to the Dragonstorms of Tarkir, which are now spiraling out of control since Ugin left the plane. So it's also possible the Kings in the Dark are the old Khans from the original Tarkir timeline? Maybe? It feels weird to have 2 different ancient powers out there, like they couldn't commit to a vision of what comes after the Phyrexians and the Eldrazi and Nicol Bolas. I don't think Magic needs a big bad, though. The smaller stories work just fine, like we saw here with Mabel chasing an egg. That provided a reasonable conflict and made it easy to tell what each character wanted and what they were willing to do to get it. Honestly, Mabel might have been a bit overdeveloped. She's a mom, she's a baker, she's the descendant of a mighty hero, and happens to have a powerful sword hidden up in the attic. The story even tells us about a time earlier in her life when she climbed something literally called the Cliff of Heroes, and then defended her town from bandits. All of which is fine, but it makes it maybe a little too easy to like Mabel, and her success was never really in doubt, you know? I liked Helga a lot more. She is consistently doubting herself, and she feels really isolated from her peers. She had an embarrassing encounter with King Glarb in her youth, and was reluctant to go see him again regarding the egg. So seeing her go from meek sketchbook artist to hero in Mabel's shadow felt like a more interesting progression because I wasn't really sure how that arc was going to play out. As for the rest of the gang, well, we've got a Hawkeye, a Hulk, and a Black Widow. At the birthday party, we learn Finneas is so good at archery, he is banned from the casual competitions they hold in town and instead has to serve as the judge. He also has a quiver of various trick arrows and in combat will notch 2 or more at a time. Hugs is of course the strongest in the bunch and he actually carries Zoraline around on his back while she sleeps all day, which was a fun detail. He doesn't talk much, but we do see him crush some skulls, just like in the art for his card. So, hey, at least we got some truth in advertising there. Gev is actually the best, though, right? He's entirely competent. He's often on point because he is stealthy, and he's really good with his maces. And he's always telling us about how this battle reminds him of this other tougher battle he had once. And he manages to be funny without being annoying, so I think he's my favorite of the bunch. And then there's Zoraline, who mostly sleeps, and at night she flies back home to update the village on their progress, and then flies back to Mabel. So she is basically the group's save point. How can anybody not like that joke? Anyway, including a second Calamity Beast just to sweep our heroes from one location to another felt cheap. That was probably my least favorite part of the story, because it was also confusing. Was Eluge trying to help find the egg, or was this just one of the normally rare random Calamity Beast appearances? The character reactions don't really tell us. And then we've got Helga's original drawing of the Sun Hawk, which never appears in the story and doesn't even get a card. Instead, we have the Dragon Hawk. Are we supposed to infer that the Sunhawk got changed into the Dragonhawk? I don't think so. So the original Sunhawk must still be out there somewhere, and it's just a coincidence that Dragonhawk looks similar? The Bloomburrow story moves pretty briskly, but when you stop to examine some of the finer details, why did everyone from Pondside flee and go in a different direction than Helga? Not one of them wound up in Good Hill to validate her story? Why did the fish attack push Mabel right into the cave where the helpful rats were waiting? They also told her to be on the lookout for more helpful rats later because they sent their own scouts to follow the egg too, but we never saw them. Oh, and one final mystery. When Ral speaks with Helga about Jace and his tattoos, she says, quote, "I've seen him in my dreams. He's not alone. There's a lizard folk with green and black scales and yellow eyes, and another small creature who's hard to see. A dark cloud follows them." Ral ponders this and asks Helga if she's sure it is a lizard and not a snake, because he's expecting Vraska would be a snake. But the big fish attack happens before Helga can reply, and it never comes up again. So clearly Helga is describing Jace, Vraska, and Lute, only Vraska is a lizard, but her secret layer card shows her as a snake. Now I know that's not canon, but why would they show her as a snake if in the story she actually does pass through here and is a lizard? I don't know. It feels like some stuff had to be cut in order to fit everything into the 5 chapters. But we are left with a fun little tale about a group of critters who just want to restore peace to their valley, and I can respect that. But what about you? Did you enjoy your first visit to Bloomburrow? And do you think these spotlight cards did a good job showing the important characters and events from this story? Or are you just as confused about Helga's vision as I am? Let me know down in the comments, and then make sure you like this video and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the great stories you will only find here on Magic Arcanum. We'll see ya.